Okay, thank you. Welcome to this uh, free webinar from Technical Agility Institute. And today we are having our uh, one of the prestigious or honor to have a very seasoned and well-known agile coach from US, uh, Ivan O'Leary, right? He is having a very hands-on experience on technical side as well as on the flow and process side as well. So it's a something like a very rare combination and that we are having here. We will get lots of you can say knowledge sharing from his side, the experiences that he has seen. He is having a very rich experience where he has seen lots of industry revolution. If you look at right on the DevOps side or in the tool side, the way now we are actually going towards that new way of revolution like a Gen AI and all, right? So we are really thankful to Ivan. He has given some time with us, and today we are going to talk about something which is the theme is like a embrace technical agility in order to sustain that product into the market, right? So welcome Ivan, and thanks
Yeah,
for
thank you,
joining
Vinay.
us in your morning time, right?
Yeah, no,
And
no
yep,
worries, no worries. I'm
okay,
I'm looking forward to it. And basically, I have a lot of conversations. I do a lot of work in the Agile community. Like yesterday, I facilitated the Agile Alliance Lean Coffee. They have a US time zone based Lean Coffee session. So you could sort of think of me as someone who's kind of in the trenches, but also sort of talking to a lot of other agile practitioners. And honestly, I mean, the where we are with things is it almost feels like um, we've kind of lost our way. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
yep,
Good. Okay. All right. So we've kind of lost our way as agile practitioners, and I sort of look at that. You look at the marketplace. You look at contraction that's going on. I mean, just the other day, I sort of looked at I heard news that for the first time ever, some of the big companies in India were sort of pausing hiring and were even letting people go, and that's sort of a very very different place for us all to be in, right? Normally, it's been growth, 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 growth. So sort of in this time, you get a lot of people saying, "Is Agile dead?" Um, and the perspectives that I'm going to share with you today and sort of suggestions and guidance are really. Let me just quickly. Where's my microphone? Okay, can everyone hear me again? Sorry about that. My
yeah.
headphones
You are audible.
10 o'clock in the morning here in St. Augustine. But basically, the perspectives that I'll share with you are the perspectives that I'm hearing a lot in the marketplace, in the community, and talking to customers that I have. Just a little bit about me, my background. I was originally a coder. Then I've moved into consulting. I've been in executive management from a technology perspective. I've also been a product leader. And most recently, just working, in the space of and domain of being an agile coach and a practitioner. I do a lot of work in the DevOps space, as Vinay mentioned. I hold a certified enterprise coach from the Scrum Alliance and the ICE, which is the acknowledged expert certification in agile coaching from IC Agile. My focus in life is really helping engineering leaders improve their ability to lead, and developers and teams help. I help them improve their ability to deliver great products with built-in quality. Some of the other things that I do from a leadership perspective, I co-teach um, a session on vertical facilitation with Michael Hammond and Lisa Atkins. Some of you may know Lisa from the book or from the Agile Coaching Institute and the book Coaching Agile Teams. And my sort of background is I live on an old sailboat, which is my home here in St. Augustine, Florida. And my dog's called Gretel, and you may be fortunate enough to hear her barking in the background as we kind of go forward. So that's a little bit about me. I wish I had the opportunity to actually meet some of you and work with some of you kind of going forward, so I can do the same and learn your biography and backgrounds as we go forward. So a little bit about what we're going to sort of talk about today. I'm always excited to find out who's here. So my question really for you is like, if you were to sort of say, and maybe just put this in the sort of the comments or in the chat, what is your sort of orientation? Are you a software engineer? Are you in QA? Do you consider yourself a Scrum Master or an Agile coach? Are you a product owner? Are you in engineering leadership? Do you have another role that you hold in the organization? Because like I say, I'm always excited to hear about what kind of practitioners are attending these sessions, particularly around technical agility, because I believe it's like one of the most important aspects of Agile, this whole idea of building quality in from a technical perspective. And it covers so many areas, from the technologies all the way through to sort of team culture and so on. Okay, so know a little bit about me, and that I live on a big sailboat, but I want to talk about speedboats, right? What a speedboat is and sort of how it works. A speedboat is different from any other kind of boat in that the way it goes really fast is that it's usually quite small, it's usually quite nimble, and it's quite efficient once it's got up on a plane, right? And you can think about that. You can think about the speedboat as your team, right? If you are in a much bigger boat that doesn't get up on this plane, right, you have to push all of the water out of the way. And very often, like if you think about those two different modalities, like this idea of a boat that goes really fast because it skims across the surface of the water, and it can change direction really quickly. It's sort of super effective in that way compared to, one of those big boats that you will see when you kind of go look on the ocean, right? They turn slowly, they move, with great great purpose, right? They're like really slow because they're pushing a whole lot of water aside. And when we think about technical agility and we think about the contribution that attending to technical excellence has on the way that Agile sort of operates in the world, it really helps us get our teams up on a plane, meaning they can be, smaller, they can be nimble, they can be fast, they can be efficient, and, honestly, they can be agile. So, if you think about a big ship trying to push all that water out of the way while it's sort of moving its cargo along, this is what happens when teams don't pay attention to technical excellence, where they don't sort of like pay attention to architecture. They don't pay attention to, maybe shifting their testing strategy or a shift left test strategy. So testing as early as possible. And unfortunately, what's happened, in the Agile community, and this is certainly some of the feedback that we're all getting, is that we've biased very strongly towards process, right? Where you have a lot of work and a lot of effort that's gone on into making our processes really complete. If you just have to look at any of the sort of the process leaders in the marketplace, whether it's less, whether it's safe, whether it's whoever it is, there is a lot of information that's in there. There's a lot of sort of almost kind of prescription or documentation
that shows up when an organization is kind of applying those. And the question we always have to ask, and this is sort of really where things kind of come from, is, how is this helping developers deliver better products, right? Because a lot of the conversation that I've heard, certainly in the US marketplace, and from other places as well, it may be different for you, but is along the lines of, the people who really don't like Agile are the developers. And I sort of scratch my head at this. One of the founders of Agile, the original people who was in the room at in Snowbird in Utah, at the ski resort where it was all sort of decided on and kind of talked about, is in a class that I'm currently working with. And his attitude is, wow, we kind of lost the plot, because we now have way too much in the form of process. And he's actually leading with the Agile Alliance and a few other folks this idea of how do you reinvent Agile for the age of artificial intelligence, of large language models, and so on. So this is really timely. It's kind of topical. Most recently, the Agile Alliance sort of they usually have one big conference on an annual basis. So their big conference is seeing a 30% decline in registrations, which means that they have to, as an organization, because they don't sell certifications and what have you like some others do, they have to really adapt and adjust how they're speaking to the market, what they're doing, and to sort of make things kind of work in a different way. So there is time for us to relook at and relearn, get a refresher on these 12 principles that are sort of enshrined here. And I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm not going to drain this slide. I'm sure that all of you are, if you're sort of paying attention to Agile, you know what these principles are. But I would encourage you just to look at these and then think about your own context. Think about your own environment. Think about where you work on a day-to-day basis and the practices and the things that you're doing. And ask yourself, are these principles actually alive in my organization today? Are we doing these kinds of things? And it's not necessarily to kind of go and, oh, we need to do this whole big transformation or what have you, because, very often, and particularly now, organizations don't have the appetite or the budget or the time available, the focus needed to actually conduct sort of a full-scale organizational process, culture transformation, right? Very often, as developers, as engineers, and so on, we're sort of sitting in the space of, here's this code base. We've got all these pull requests, that have been submitted into this thing, and now our branches are out of sync, and oh boy, now what do we do, right? So we're kind of almost at the nitty gritty, and sometimes these principles can actually be sort of lofty and airy. But I would encourage you just to kind of go through things like, are your Agile processes promoting sustainable development, or you as a developer, or you seeing your development teams, if you're an engineering manager, if you're seeing folks sort of work on the weekends, work late at night, that level of commitment is commendable, but is that really sustainable? Can you actually sort of rely on folks to kind of like, work like that day in and day out and day in and day out? The chances are that's probably starting to introduce some issues in your code base. Anyway, first sort of thing that I always like to ground this kind of a conversation in is, for Agile to be dead, these 12 principles, wouldn't apply any longer. But I have never met anyone in my 15 years of being an Agile practitioner, at various points, people have said Agile is dead. But then you go back to these 12 principles and you ask, well, are these not valid any longer? And people say, well, maybe face-to-face communication, but well, guess what? Zoom is a proxy, or StreamYard like this is a proxy for face-to-face communication. Is it absolutely perfectly ideal? Are we all in the same room, the same time zone, all of the time? No. However, we have we have ways of doing this. Those kinds of things. So this being said, like there are about 7 different suggestions that have kind of come up in the conversation that I've had, and the work that I've been doing with clients over the course of the last 6 or so months. And I've specifically and intentionally sort of stepped away from references to AI in this session, because I believe that AI is another tool in our arsenal. It's not necessarily a huge replacement for us at this time. I mean, that may change, but for today, let's jump into the suggestions that have kind of come up. So the first and most important thing here is, like, we have to make an effort to reconnect Agile with technical excellence. I'm a frequent poster and reader of the Reddit forums on Agile, on Scrum, and a couple of other places. And the thing that you're bound to get with Reddit is that you get a lot of folks who are software developers on there. I read R Programming, R Experienced Devs, and a lot of these. And in those, unfortunately, what's happened is Agile has been conflated with heavy process overhead. And the irony of all of this, and the person I was working with last week, John Kern, was like, we started this Agile thing because we were frustrated developers, because we were trying to get through to the organizations that we served and explain to their leadership that actually there was a better way of doing the development work. Unfortunately, what's happened is we've sort of taken this idea of technical excellence, and inadvertently, not intentionally, right, just by focusing and sort of putting our attention too much onto process, we've sort of created a situation where we're really good at process, however, at the expense or the cost of our technical excellence. And you can hear this, when you go and sort of talk to maybe some of the architects in your world, right? Maybe the governance people in your world. And, basically, my perspective on this and what I've seen is that I don't think that we're having the right conversations about this. And, examining our process frameworks, whatever they might be, and just sort of asking the question, where would it be possible to streamline in support of developers having 60 minutes a week to actually go ahead and do some practice coding, actually engage in and this is one of the areas where I see tools like Claude and various others basically supporting your own development practices and improving your development practices. So the first point here is, like, let's acknowledge there's this issue. Like, we've disconnected, our Agile practices with technical excellence, or from technical excellence. And we should really bring these two things together. The second suggestion that I have is really this idea of, spending time with the inner game of Agile, right? The outer game of Agile is like all of the processes, the different roles that we inhabit. But the inner game of Agile is like, things like psychological safety on our teams. And, do we have this a culture that's considered to be a speak up culture? And, do you have that on your team, but is that, not permissible in your organization? And, to be completely candid, the appetite for this is dependent on the kind of organization that you work for, your organization's culture and so on. And what I'm definitely not suggesting here, is that you go and say, oh, we must have this particular culture or we're not going to be successful. You can be successful without it, but just be aware of what the culture in your organization is. Because, if you implement a whole series of new sort of agile processes, or maybe you've been doing this for quite some time, when you go through that process, it's still the same people who are talking to each other and working together with each other. Maybe you reorganized the organization at the same time, so all the teams were shaken up and the people are different. But did we learn any new skills? Did we learn how to relate to each other, how to communicate with each other? When in this new process, most often the answer is no. So that might be one area to kind of like really examine and explore. And then there's this little model we call the SCARF model. It's really fun. Like, think about a change that you had in your environment, in your world recently, and then think about how that affected how you feel about your status, how certain you are about what's going to happen when you get to the office the next day, and and the next week and the next month. How did this affect your ability to sort of operate on an autonomous basis? Did that increase or decrease? Anyway, so these, and then relatedness means, how did this affect your your ability? Like the reorganization I kind of mentioned, that to break up teams. Maybe you're now in a new team, and you have to rebuild all of the relationships that you had with your colleagues, because the folks that you were working with in a team, that's a completely different team now, right? So all of these things actually affect your like how you sense or how you are aware of the psychology of the team. And it's super interesting to kind of see this work start showing up. There are I believe there's a really, really useful document out there, produced by a couple of researchers, that sort of talks about how to deal with the stress of code reviews. Okay, because all of this stuff actually does impact us. I mean, if you're really worried on Sunday nights and you're getting ready to get to the office on Monday, and then Monday nights you're going to have to deal with all the folks in the US, when they come online and what have you, and maybe the last code review you had was really nerve-wracking and wasn't very positive. Well, it's actually not a great environment for psychological safety there. So ask questions about that, kind of work through that, because even though that is not specifically technical agility, when you are able to feel a little bit more free, you can learn new ways of solving technical problems through code. You can learn new interfaces, new APIs, new languages, new techniques to solve some of the same problems a lot easier when you're not sort of super anxious and nervous about where things are. So the third recommendation is to try to keep your products lean, and this is sort of this idea. And for those of you who are sort of in the product space, this is probably kind of more up your alley. But the leaner you keep your products when things are changing, things are shifting, several things happen. First off, that wave that you're pushing in front of the boat to get up onto a plane, that's going to be smaller because there's less to change. And then, hopefully what you're going to be doing is you're going to be focusing your time, attention, effort, energy, focus on the things that are most important for your customers, right? And if you succeed when things are difficult, wow, all right, you've proved that you can succeed when things are difficult, when the economic cycle returns to where it should be, because it's always a cycle, so it'll get better at some point. When interest rates start coming down and various things like that, then you will succeed a lot better in better economic times. But this is where I sort of say, okay, shift left. People understand that in the context of the testing strategy, but I actually like to extend that and sort of say, Well, shift left includes like the minimum viable product approach that you might, minimum viable feature, minimum marketable feature. So all of those kinds of practices and behaviors, the earlier you can get feedback, the earlier you can get information from the market in terms of your product market fit and so on, the more effective you're going to be, particularly when we're, operating under this idea that, well, Agile is dead or the world is under duress, etc. The fourth suggestion I have is really, let's spend time on architecture. There's so many teams that I've worked with recently where the folks in the architecture basically are in an ivory tower, meaning they're sort of there, and they'll make a command, and then that command will sort of filter down to the teams. If you're an architect, roll your sleeves up and go and spend a few days, working on some user stories with a team from a technical perspective. Go and sort of do some sort of like I wouldn't say work shadowing, but sort of pairing, and sort of learn the impact of the suggestions that you're making or the recommendations you're making from an architectural standpoint on the folks in the trenches. It might give you some feedback right away that you could apply to not only improve your architectural suggestions, but also the effectiveness of the product in the market. A couple of other suggestions that folks have talked to me about is like running architectural boot camps. Like if you've got a new framework that you're starting to use now, well, guess what? Maybe some folks on the team or in the organization know that a little bit better than others. Run an internal boot camp on it, and this is the scary thing is like set up conversations about the technical debt that you've accumulated and how you continue to accumulate technical debt. And it's not the end of the world to do either of those things, to have accumulated technical debt or to continue to accumulate technical debt. It's just one of those things that, if you sweep it under the rug, it will come back and cause issues. And then, the process will be blamed, Agile will be blamed, and ultimately all of, at the end of the day, it'll be like, oh, our developers aren't smart enough to solve these problems, when all you needed to do was just get after it and acknowledge it as a priority to address a little earlier. So the fifth item here is, if you're a developer, if you're a QA person, if you're a product person, you should be doing this already. But, no matter your role, look for opportunities to spend time with your end users and your customers, kind of like really sort of understand their needs so you can translate their needs into technology speak, and it doesn't have to be every single person on the team. Maybe you've got a couple of folks who already have the relationships with customers who are already kind of doing this. Well, promote this, advocate for it, advocate for spending time with your end users and customers. Like, because I can promise you, if you're going through challenging times, they are too. This is sort of a systemic issue, and understanding their challenges, getting some empathy with them, and sort of building a relationship, you'll start to hear stories of resilience. You'll hear interesting use cases that might actually kind of, from a product perspective, give you, at least some good insights into, how you might be able to bring something to market, which is significantly better, significantly more impactful than you currently are. So that's the fifth item. The sixth is this idea of focusing on your leadership. And the way I define a leader in this situation is anyone who influences more than one person to change their behavior, right? So if you're on a team and you happen to be the lead developer, yes, you're the lead, but you might be the QA person. You're also leading because you're influencing the team or trying to influence the team to improve their quality practices so that, you don't have to test everything in, so that you have an option or an opportunity to, teach the team how to actually think more creatively, think more expansively about how to test or how to build quality in, so it doesn't need to be tested in at sort of a later stage. And here, no matter where you are in the hierarchy, just be aware of it. But this is sort of influencing upwards. This is kind of like how you might be able to guide people you report to, and sort of give them good information, give them insights into decision making and so on. And being sensitive to your organization's culture is not a bad thing, right? Like listening to people is very often an act. It's like the first act of leadership. A couple of resources I recommend here, sort of book resources, which are very useful. They're sort of based on this idea of vertical development, meaning that the way we make decisions today, if you think about yourself when you were, and I don't know everyone's age, but I just talk about myself here. I think about the way I made decisions when I was a teenager and the way I make decisions today. I have a completely different thought process, and so on. And the difference there is that, as we age, so we grow, so we become more mature, so we become more skillful, so we become more self-aware, and these resources are really sort of to kind of like connect and catalyze your own personal leadership growth, your own personal leadership journey, based on that idea that we can change as human beings. Then the last little thing that I sort of leave you with here is this idea of learning to listen with perspective, right? I mentioned that listening is very often an act of leadership, but understanding this little model will help a lot, particularly if you start talking about it to your team. This idea that when you're listening from me, we, and us, you listen first from your own perspective. Like, what is this change? What is this this new library that we're going to use? What's the impact on me, right? Oh, I have to learn this new thing. Okay, great. All right. So then, what does it mean for the team? Oh, this new library has much better hooks for testing, perhaps written into it. Okay, fantastic. Well, let's think about it from that perspective, and then you're listening from this idea that we are benefiting from whatever the change might be. And then you sort of think about it from an us perspective. Well, not only does this library have more hooks for testing and so on, but it's also got better instrumentation, and that's going to be really helpful for the whole organization, because maybe there'll be more events that are happening in our software that allow us to monetize different things. If we're thinking about a big web application, like I once worked on for a little company that's resells tickets called StubHub. So those are the 7 different recommendations, but I want to summarize in just with this idea of the 5 L's, right? This is all based on learning. It requires you to do a little bit in the context of leadership. You need to develop the ability to listen to each other. And I put love in there because it was an L, but actually it should be empathy. It's bring empathy and care to your relationships with the folks on your team. And then there's the last point, which is lean, right? And that's where we sort of focus on efficiency. We focus on this idea of the earlier you can get feedback on things, the more effective it's going to be. And those kinds of practices that sort of are in that bundle, that's where you're kind of right sizing your efforts. You're getting to the place where that speedboat is planing up on the water, instead of trying to push as much water out of the way as possible and creating this huge wave, and not sort of operating on a very efficient basis. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time and attention.
Thanks, Ivan.
I've got
We have,
questions. Are there any questions at this point?
yeah,
I've
we have
also
few questions.
looking in
Let
the
me
chat.
read that. Yeah.
Vinay,
So, yeah. Am I audible?
cool. Vinay, you're on mute.
I'm out of mute. Am I audible now? Atul?
Yeah, yes, sir. We can hear you.
Ivan?
Any questions from our attendees?
Yeah, there are some
Okay,
questions.
all right, here we go. Okay,
Ivan, are you not able to hear me?
all right. First question, Raj, how do you prioritize which areas to focus first when listening? When I gave myself away. When transitioning to a more agile technical framework. All right. Raj, you probably are fairly aware in the environment that you're working in of, where some of the bottlenecks or the impediments might be. If you're talking a scaled agile framework environment, you might go and have a chat with your release train engineers. You might sort of talk to some of the key stakeholders. But the important thing here is really to sort of like listen in. And by the way, I include developers in those key stakeholders there. Listen for the impact, and then sort of start looking at, what is the impact of this particular lack of attention to this sort of technical focus causing for your environment. Okay. And then Raj, you also asked another. I hope that answers your question. You also asked another question. Can you discuss any emerging technologies that are particularly promising for improving technical agility? Here's one. What I like, but I haven't seen it sort of really proved out just yet, is AI. AI sort of looking at writing unit tests. A sort of a process approach to improving technical agility is what they call mob or ensemble programming. I used that at Nike in 2016 or 2017, one of those years, and it worked extremely successfully, even though we were, writing code around an SAP environment. It got our two developers to a place where there were now 4 or 5 developers in the environment that were as effective as those two folks were, because it was kind of like a focus on learning. Okay, how do you foresee the role of AI and ML, machine learning, in enhancing technical agility in the coming years? I'm not a great prognosticator, but what I'm seeing is that people are using AI. I use a Copilot when I'm sort of writing in VS Code, right? Anything and everything from unit tests all the way through to maybe full functions, but everything needs to be understood at this point. In other words, sort of blindly saying, our AI agent is basically going to write this whole thing for us. That's probably not where you want to kind of go and a set of expectations that you should be setting. However, my coding was pretty rusty, and using Copilot's GitHub Copilot in VS Code has actually been pretty helpful to me, kind of resuscitating my working knowledge of C#. So, all right. Key considerations for leaders when managing the transition to a more agile technical environment. Talk to your developers. Listen to the people that it's actually impacting. That SCARF model that I mentioned is very, very important. Like, think about, any change. Like, let's. I worked with a client recently. They were like, well, let's introduce unit testing with, and let's aim at 60 or 70% code coverage. Well, that's great, However, that's not the desired or the intended outcome. What we need to do is we need to sort of focus on how do we actually improve what those tests are, testing for, and kind of orient around that, as opposed to just chasing after a particular metric, because people will chase after metrics if you start using those. However, the metric very, very quickly loses its value, its effectiveness, if you sort of operate on that basis. How can leaders promote a culture, and this is another one from Raj, of continuous learning and development to sustain technical agility? My suggestion is ask and model the behavior of learning. Create some space for your teams to actually sort of say, okay, well, how could we solve this particular coding puzzle that we have in a novel way? The challenge always is the next thing that kind of comes across everyone's plate, and normally management is kind of dealing with that, and then that all rolls downhill to the development teams, and the development teams sort of hear about it right at the end, and then have to kind of come up with a plan to solve whatever the particular issue is, or meet some business requirement or some business need. You have to have discipline to create the space for the teams, despite what all the other stuff that's going on. To kind of give them the space to go through the code katas, for example. Okay, I hope that was helpful, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Ivan. Am I audible?
Excellent. Hello. And Vinay, just to you, you were not audible to me.
Oh, okay, fine, no problem.
But now you are. Now you are. Now you are. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your very insightful points that you have just shared with us. And yeah, we are getting one more question from Raj. How can leaders ensure their organization remain agile and adaptable in the face of rapidly changing market conditions?
That's a really, really big question. Raj, you got to the heart of the matter. I mean, let me count the ways. Happy to follow up with that one a little bit later with you directly, and sort of talk about some of the organizational transformation and leadership transformation frameworks that I've used. But certainly the sort of idea of listening and asking questions first, to get a really good sense of the me, we, and us, those three perspectives. That's a great place to start. So,
and one point which I would like to add here is you have to, in the face of a rapidly changing market conditions, you have to remain agile. Otherwise, you will be obsolete. Yeah. So it does not matter about what practices, what tools you are going to use. You just focus on whether we are agile or not. That agility is there or not. Are we able to quickly adopt whatever the market need is there, right? Can we change ourselves? Can we learn those things, right? What he has just mentioned. The summary is really, really interesting. Learn, lead, listen. Listen is very, very important, right? Yeah. Love is nothing but I really like that word, because it could be applied with multiple places. You are loving your job, you are loving your product, right? The more you will do that, you will bring the passion, right? And the lean is the least one, right? You have to always make sure that you are not becoming a fat oriented, process oriented, or all those things, right? You have to make sure that how you can remain lean. So those things will help you to become agile, right? So agility will come with that, right? Right. Okay. Nice. Okay, fine. I'm really thankful to you, right? Because you have got some time and you shared all these things, right? I believe you have also liked this by the audience, whatever they were asking the questions. They were a small glitch because we have trying to stream that in the LinkedIn also. Due to some problem from the tool that we are using right now, they were not able to connect. right? So they have sent one information also, like there is some error getting from their side. So that was a small glitch, but that's how that technical world goes, right? So that's fine.
Shift,
on
shift left.
on production day, you will find that the tools, the product
Yeah.
is not working as it is, right? So that's okay, fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us in this day, and got your time. And definitely, I feel like you got some enlightened with the talks that Ivan has shared here. And thanks Atul and the technical agility team also, who has arranged this like webinar. We look forward to the same for more. And even Ivan has shared his email ID. So if you guys need anything, you can just shoot him some messages, mails, and what. If he will get time, definitely he will respond, right? So if you need any other help and all, right, he will be there. Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks.
everyone.
Have a
Thanks
nice
everyone.
day,
Thanks,
Ivan.
Vinay sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.